Happy Hoodoo Heritage Month. As soon as I am able to get this camera in this holster, we will get started. Okay, there we go. Get it back a little bit. Okay, so this is day 2 of a month of Mojoism. And today we're going to be reading from one of my favorite books in the genre of Mojoism, which is literature that is inspired and informed by Hoodoo, the spirituality of Africans born in the United States of America. This particular book is Song of Solomon. Song of Solomon is one of the many masterpieces of Mother Toni Morrison, Ibara Tarun, who has now gone on to become an honored ancestress. I was introduced to Toni Morrison as a senior in high school. I'm from a town with a very, very small Black population. And so in my public library, in my school library, there were very few books that were written by Black people. So I did not grow up with the luxury of reading Black authors. In addition to that, the way that my grandmother and my mother had been raised was to understand that certain authors would increase your vocabulary and give you a way of speaking and a way of reading and writing that would make you more useful and more marketable in the world. And so I had been raised reading Charles Dickens and Mary Poppins and the Little Prince and all of those classics. So I had been raised reading those things and was astute in most of what was considered classic literature in the West, and was about to go into college and be an English major and soon be a person who taught reading and writing. And so my dear cousin, my first cousin, her name was Deborah, was in school at Tennessee State University at the time, studying journalism. And at one point, she came to visit my mother. She was home, and she came to visit my mother. And she gifted me with a book. I'd never seen this type of book, and I had never heard of this author. But the book was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. And I tore into the book as soon as she gave it to me. And I read it all in one night. And I was amazed, and I was liberated, and I was seen, and I was shown, and I existed, and I had a place in literature, right? And that was what my cousin wanted me to see. She saw that there was a gap in my knowledge, and so she very kindly filled that gap for me. And so once I matriculated at the illustrious Fisk University, Fisk forever, my specialization, my area of specialization became what we called in those days Negro Lit. I was taught by the illustrious Dr. Leslie Collins, Ibara Tarun, who was a contemporary of Langston Hughes and James Weldon Johnson and Paul Laurence Dunbar. He was literally alive during the Harlem Renaissance. So that was my main teacher at Fisk University. But if my cousin had never given me that book, I never would have learned the beauty that is African American literature, and certainly wouldn't know the beauty that is Mojoism. So the book we're going to discuss, I'm going to share with you today, the passage I'm going to share with you today is Toni Morrison's Song of Solomon. This is the magnificent moment when Milkman, the protagonist in the book, comes of age. What kind of savages were these people? Suspicious, hot-tempered, eager to find fault and despise any outsider, touchy, devious, jealous, traitorous, and evil. He had done nothing to deserve their contempt, nothing to deserve the hostility that engulfed him when he said that he might have to buy a car. Why didn't they respond the way the man in Roanoke did when he bought the car? Because in Roanoke, he didn't have a car. Here he had one, and he wanted another, and perhaps it was that upset them. Furthermore, he hadn't even suggested that he would trade off the old one. He had hinted that he would abandon the broken one and just get another. But so what? What business was it of theirs, what he did with his money? He didn't deserve. It sounded old. Deserve. Old and tired and beaten to death. Deserve. Now it seemed to him that he was always saying or thinking that he didn't deserve some bad luck or some bad treatment from others. He told Guitar that he didn't deserve his family's dependence or hatred or whatever. That he didn't even deserve to hear all the misery and mutual accusations his parents unloaded onto him. Nor did he deserve Hagar's vengeance. But why shouldn't his parents tell him their personal problems? If not him, then who? And if a stranger could try to kill him, surely Hagar, who knew him and who he'd thrown away like a wad of chewing gum after the flavor was gone, surely she had a right to try to kill him too. Apparently, he thought he only deserved to be loved. From a distance, though, and given what he wanted. And in return, he would do what? Be pleasant? Be generous? Maybe all he was really saying was, I am not responsible for your pain. Share your happiness with me, but not your unhappiness. These were troublesome thoughts, but they wouldn't go away. Under the moon, on the ground, alone, without even the sound of baying dogs to remind him that he was with other people himself, the cocoon that was his personality gave way. He could barely see his own hand and couldn't see his feet. He was only his breath, coming slower now, and his thoughts. The rest of him had disappeared. So the thoughts came unobstructed by other people, by things, by even the sight of himself. There was nothing here to help him. Not his money, not his car, his father's reputation, his suit, or his clothes. In fact, they hampered him. Except for his broken watch and his wallet with about $200, all he had started out with on his journey was gone. His suitcase with the scotch, the shirts, the space for bags of gold, his snap brim hat, his tie, his shirt, his three-piece suit, and his socks. His watch and $200 would be of no help out here, while all a man had was what he was born with or learned to use, and endurance. Eyes, ears, nose, taste, touch, and some other sense that he knew he did not have. An ability to separate out of all of the things that there were to sense the one that life itself might depend on. What did Calvin see on the bark, on the ground? What was he saying? What did he hear that made him know something unexpected had happened some 2 miles away? And that something was a different kind of prey, a bobcat. He could still hear them. The way they sounded the last few hours, signaling one another. What were they saying? Wait up? Over here? Little by little, it fell into place. The dogs, the men, none was just hollering or signaling location or pace. The men and the dogs were talking to one another. In distinctive voices, they were saying distinctive, complicated things. That long yah sound was followed by a specific type of howl from one of the dogs. The low hum hum that sounded like a string bass, imitating a bassoon, meant something that the dogs understood and executed. And the dogs spoke to the man. Single sharp barks, evenly spaced and then widely spaced, one every 2, 3, or 4 minutes. And that might go on for 20 minutes. A sort of radar that indicated to the men where they were, what they saw, and what they wanted to do about it. And the men agreed or told them to change direction or to come back. All those shrieks, those rapid tumbling barks, the long sustained yell, the tuba sounds, the drum beat sounds, the low liquid the reedy whistles, the thin ease of a cornet, the bass chords. It was all a language. An extension of the click that people made in their cheeks back home when they wanted a dog to follow them. No, it wasn't a language. It was what was used before language. Before things were written down. Language in the time when men and animals did talk to one another. When a man could sit down with an ape and the two converse. When a tiger and a man could share the same tree and each understood the other. When men ran with wolves, not from or after them. And he was hearing it in the Blue Ridge Mountains under a sweet gum tree. And if they could talk to animals and the animals could talk to them, what didn't they know about human beings? Or the earth itself, for that matter? It was more than tracks Calvin was looking for. He whispered to the trees, whispered to the ground, touched them as a blind man caresses a page of braille, pulling meaning through his fingers. Milkman rubbed the back of his head against the bark. This was what Guitar missed about the South. The woods, hunters, killing. But something had maimed him, scarring him like Reverend Cooper's knot, like Saul's missing teeth, and like his own father. He felt a sudden rush of affection for them all. Out there under the sweet gum tree with the sound of the men tracking a bobcat, he thought he understood Guitar now. He really understood him. Down on either side of his thighs, he felt the sweet gum surface roots cradling him. The rough but maternal hands of a grandfather. Feeling both tense and relaxed, he sunk his fingers into the grass. He tried to listen with his fingertips, to hear what, if anything, the earth had to say. And it told him quickly that someone was standing behind him, and he had just enough time to raise one hand to his neck and catch the wire that fastened around his throat. It cut like a razor into his fingers, tore the skin so deeply that he had to let go. The wire pressed into his neck and then took his breath. He thought he heard himself gurgling and saw a burst of many-colored lights dancing before his eyes. When the music followed the colored lights, he knew he had just drawn the last sweet air left for him in the world. Exactly the way he'd heard it would be. His life flashed before him. But it consisted of only one image. Hagar bending over him in perfect love, in the most intimate sexual gesture imaginable. In the midst of that picture, he heard the voice of the someone holding the wire say, "Your day has come." And it filled him with such sadness to be dying, leaving this world at the fingertips of his friend, that he relaxed. And the instant it took him to surrender to the overwhelming melancholy. He felt the cords of his struggling neck muscles relax too. And there was another piece of the second in which the wire left him room enough to gasp, take another breath, and this time not a dying one. Hagar, the lights, the music disappeared, and Milkman grabbed the Winchester at his side, cocked it, and pulled the trigger, shooting into the trees in front of him. The blast startled Guitar, and the wire slipped again. Guitar pulled it back, but Milkman knew his friend would need both hands to keep it that way. He turned the shotgun backward as far as he could manage and awkwardly pulled the trigger again, hitting only branches and dirt. He was wondering if there was another blast in the gun when he heard right up close the wild, wonderful sounds of the 3 baying dogs who he knew had treed a bobcat. The wire dropped, and he heard Guitar breaking into a fast run through the trees. Milkman stood up and grabbed his flashlight, pointing it in the direction of the sound of running feet. He saw nothing but branches resettling themselves. Rubbing his neck, he moved toward the sound of the dogs. And that is the moment that Milkman, who had been a boy all through the story, became a man. You should read Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison to understand the ways and the mores of your ancestors, to lean deeply into your hoodoo heritage, and to completely and totally embrace this magical sacred time of Hoodoo Heritage Month. I will see you Friday, where I will share another passage of Mojoism with you. In the meantime, ecstasy, abundance, and bliss to all of those within the sound of my voice who are wishing the same for me and mine. And we wish the lessons of life on those who are ignorant enough to wish us otherwise. Peace, y'all.